Welcome to the first edition of Coffee Convo with Ak. This is just a little series that I'll be posting maybe once a week, and it's just me over a latte reacting to certain fights that just happened, maybe previewing some fights, giving some advice on some betting odds, and maybe reacting to some big boxing news. And from time to time, along my journey, I will be reviewing certain coffee shops around the country and around the world. If you know me, you know I'm a coffee connoisseur, so I'll be bringing that to you as well. But today's episode is based on a post that I put up on Instagram about a week ago. It was a throwback video of me, Barack, and Kate Abdo on a broadcast, and me stating that Canelo Alvarez was the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. That's my opinion. This is subjective. And listen, disclaimer, this is not a shot or a response to Oscar Delahoya necessarily. I mean, Oscar's my guy. We've worked around each other for many years at many Dazn events, and he's been on our show many times. So in my book, Oscar is solid. And with that being said, I do want to address something that he said on his comment, which was, there's a deep, rich Mexican history in boxing, and there's so many fighters way better than Canelo. I should do my research. So I'll let this be known. I've been immersed in this boxing thing since 5 years old. I didn't fight professionally, but I did fight 75 amateur fights, and I've been a student of the game ever since. Maybe Oscar wasn't aware of that. So I'm well aware of Mexican boxing history. So I want to start off by bringing up a few Mexican greats and ones that people generally bring up in this conversation of the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. I can't bring up every single fighter, but I'll start off with one of my favorites, Salvador Sanchez. Now, Salvador Sanchez is one of the guys that most old-timers and OGs bring up when talking about the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, because he was super talented, phenomenal fighter, no question about it. But unfortunately, he died an untimely death at 23 years old from a car accident, and he had only accomplished one world title in one division. Now, we can't base greatness off of potential, off of what somebody could have been. Now, yes, I mean, the world was in his hands. He was such a great fighter. Unfortunately, he didn't do enough to put himself in that category as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. One world title, one division, super talented. Let's move on to Rubén Olivares. Rubén Olivares won 3 world titles in 2 divisions. I mean, great fighter. He was solid. In some cases, he reminds me of Canelo Alvarez, but just a lot slower, a little less defense. The ring IQ wasn't the same, in my opinion. 3 world titles, 2 divisions. Let's move on to actually one of my favorite fighters of all time, Ricardo Finito Lopez. Lopez was a sharpshooter. He threaded the needle, pinpoint, boxer, puncher. So talented. He retired undefeated. Smaller guy, nevertheless, phenomenal fighter, so talented. Like, I like to have him in a conversation. I even have him above Julio Cesar Chavez. We'll get into him a little later. So he won 4 world titles in 2 divisions. 4 world titles in 2 divisions. Let's get into another all-time great, Juan Manuel Marquez, who happens to be one of Canelo's biggest haters. Let's talk about his accomplishments. 7 world titles in 4 different divisions. That's a lot. Great fighter. But one thing I want to point out, you know, Marquez fought Pacquiao 4 times, all right? Now, when you talk about deep resume, he's had some great wins, but you can't count the same guy as if it was 4 different opponents. And sometimes people get that confused when you fight the same guy over and over again with deep resume. You know, if you're fighting the same fighter, it's one guy. So I don't know if his resume is as deep as people, you know, may talk about or people may say, but he's a great fighter nevertheless. Let's move on to another Mexican great, Marcos Antonio Barrera. 6 world titles, 3 divisions. He's had some battles. He's had some great fights. Wasn't the most defensive, but his claim to fame is beating the hot, popular, hard-hitting Prince Nassim Ahmed at the time when Prince was knocking everybody out. He outboxed him, so he showed the world he can box, and I think Marcos Barrera is a phenomenal fighter. He is an all-time great. Can you name him the greatest of all time? Of course not. Not with that, not with his resume, and not with some of the wars he's been in. Remember, being a great is not only being in big wars. It's about skill set and accomplishment. So let's move forward let's address the elephant in the room. The one guy that people love to say is the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. I mean, people will want to physically attack you if you beg to differ. And I'm talking about the great Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., one of the best body punchers of all time, bro. He was a killer. Very talented fighter. He won 5 world titles in 3 divisions. But I want to point out a couple of things when it comes to the Julio Cesar Chavez. He did get hit a lot in that ring. But let's point out one. I put an asterisk on his career for a couple of reasons. 65-0, he fought a guy by the name of Roman Araburo, 0-1 at the time. Chavez was 65-0. He fought a fighter that was 0-1. Would that be accepted today? Absolutely not. He was 69-0. 69-0. He fought a fighter by the name of Akers Ado, 5-3. Maybe just 2 soft touches, right? Can we give him a pass for that? But he was also 77-0, 77 wins, no losses, already a world champion. He fought a guy that was 7-2 by the name of Ignacio Perdomo. 77-0, fought a guy that was 7-2. Now, that's not saying that he wasn't great. I just wanted to point those little nuances out, those little facts out. But let's bring Canelo Alvarez in this conversation, all right? So when Chavez was 21 years old, he was 35-0. 35-0, 21 years old. He fought a guy that was 1-1. All right, so let's compare Canelo Alvarez at 21 years old. 21 years old, they had almost the same record. 36-0, Canelo Alvarez. You know who he was fighting? Matthew Hatton, who was 41-4, and who was fighting for the WBC Super Welterweight Championship of the World. Same age, relatively the same records. One guy was fighting a guy that was 1-1. One guy was fighting a guy that was 41-4 for a world title. All right, so I had to point that out. With that being said, I think Chavez is a phenomenal fighter. He's in that conversation, but he's not even in my top 3 of greatest Mexicans of all time. In fact, the only fighter that you can that has an argument and that I consider Mexican, and a lot of you don't because he wasn't born in Mexico, and his name is Oscar Delahoya. Phenomenal fighter, never ducked anybody, fought the best of his era. Now, he won 11 world titles in 6 different divisions. Now we're talking about serious accomplishments, not to mention winning a gold medal in the Olympics. He is an all-time great, and I have him above Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. Let's talk about Canelo Alvarez. 17 world titles in 4 different divisions. Pay-per-view star. He's a guy that draws everybody in. The casual fans into the sport, just like Oscar did. When you talk about accomplishments and weight divisions and risks that he has taken in the sport, there is no comparison. There is no comparison. When I base my decision on who's the greatest Mexican of all time, the criteria is many things: skill, defense, punching power, accomplishments, hardware, legacy. Those are important things when you talk about the greatest of all time. Not the most popular because the Mexican people loved him like the Julio Cesar Chavez. Yes, he was great. Yes, he accomplished a lot. But look at those little details in his record that people are not mentioning. And he got hit a lot. So listen, all of these fighters I mentioned, there's so many more, but these are the guys that people generally bring up when talking about the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. So I've done my research. I understand the history and all the great Mexican fighters of all time, but this is my opinion on why Canelo Alvarez is the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. 17 world titles, 4 different divisions. And guess what, people? This is the scariest part. He's not even done yet. That's my take on the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. Peace and love. Stay safe. We're out of here.